today's prophecy in the news, we're going to take a look at ancient astronomy. One day I sat down at my computer and brought up my astronomy program called Starry Night Pro in the Macintosh, by the way. And I charted for 6,000 years every conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. It's a fascinating story that we have to tell you today, and Gary Stearman is here to discuss with me the legendary saga of Jupiter and Saturn.
A saga, a battle. There is literally a great battle raging in the heavens, and guess what? We're spectators. We can watch it. And it begins, actually it's bookended by two major prophecies. The first one, Genesis 3:15, where God is speaking to the couple after they had sinned, and he says, I will put enmity between thee, that is the serpent, and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, thou shalt bruise his heel. That, JR, is the beginning of an ages-long conflict, and the end of it is seen in Revelation.
In Revelation chapter 12, we are told, there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pained to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them into the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. This is the story that begins in Genesis and ends in Revelation. It is the story in the Bible, the conflict between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, the conflict between Christ and the devil and Lucifer. And so, Gary, I noticed that in Greek mythology, there was a story about Jupiter and Saturn. Of course, Jupiter was called Zeus and Saturn was called Kronos, but it's the same planets. And the story is that Saturn ruled the earth during its golden age. And he ate his sons. Well, when Jupiter was born, Rhea, his mother, hid Jupiter away until he became of age. And she wrapped up a rock in swaddling clothes and gave it to Saturn, and he plunked it down, swallowed this stone he thought was Jupiter. But of course, when Jupiter came of age, he became the head of the Olympians. And Saturn was the head of the Titans, the 12 Titans, you know. Jupiter won the battle against his father, deposed him, and took over the throne as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And he cast all of the Titans into Tartarus, the bottomless pit. Well, this is a Greek mythological story, but I want you to know that it goes back into ancient history. You can see the same story with Isis and Sirius in Egypt. You can see the same story in ancient Babylonian lore. So we have this incredible conflict between Jupiter and Saturn.
Now let me quickly say, we're not talking about astrology. Please understand, astrology is a human perversion of the divine gospel in the stars, which was written about by J.A. Seiss and E.W. Bullinger. J.R. has done work on this over the years. We've done a number of commentaries. We're not talking about astrology here. What we have noted, J.R., many studies, that what is usually called mythology is simply a human perversion of a divine truth.
Right. So the mythology of Greece and Egypt and Babylon and Rome were astrology, but it was born out of this ancient conflict. And in every civilization, an early civilization, the story was that the virgin would bring forth the virgin-born Son of God. And Jupiter became the symbol of the coming Messiah, the seed of the woman. And Saturn was Satan. And he was the one who is to be conquered by Jupiter. So we're going to look into ancient astronomy and to see just how it fits. And by the way, as I looked over 6,000 years of human history, I found 303 conjunctions between Jupiter and Saturn throughout history. 303.
JR, let me just interrupt again and say quickly now, hang on, because this gets really interesting. This is not accidental. Genesis 1:14. God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, for seasons, for days, for years." He didn't put those up there by accident. He put them up in patterns, and the patterns were to be a demonstration of his redemptive plan. Yes. And that's where we're starting.
It is so, as I watched my computer screen and saw these incredible conjunctions, 303 of them, it was so fascinating to me because of the timing of them, which I'm hoping we'll get to at least most of them. But I tell you what, the article is in our May edition of Prophecy in the News magazine. On the cover here, of course, you see Mark Biltz and the solar and lunar eclipses of 2014-2015, which is the cover story in our magazine. But on page 6, I've added to that another story about the legendary saga of Jupiter and Saturn.
Well, now let's embark upon this ages-long saga. That's what JR has called it, the legendary saga of Jupiter and Saturn. As it happens, Jupiter crosses Saturn in the heavens, and this happens about every 20 years, but it happens in very special ways.
And at very special times. You're going to be blown away as you watch this program. And I trust you'll not get confused by the dating that we use here. But I can tell you that out of 303 conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn, 36 of them were triple conjunctions. And the triple conjunctions are especially important. A Barbanel, for example, a Jewish rabbi who lived in around 1480, wrote that the sages, his predecessors, had written that a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation Pisces would herald the birth of the Messiah. As a matter of fact, the Egyptian astrologers told Pharaoh that the conjunction they saw between Jupiter and Saturn foretold the birth of a Jewish leader who would excel all men and liberate the Jews and go down in history. Well, because of that, Pharaoh had all the boy babies born to Jewish mothers thrown into the Nile River, all over the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. So that's how important this ancient story is. So let's begin, Gary. It's the first day of Adam's life. Friday, September 29th, 4004 BC. Sunset, 7:14 in the evening. God comes down the cool of the evening. Hello, Adam. How you doing? How you feeling? Oh, Adam says, I feel great. And so God says, okay, I'm here to begin your first Bible lesson. The Bible is written in the stars. And God says, look over at the eastern horizon. See what's rising above that eastern horizon? This is sunset on the first day of Adam's life. Friday, September 29th, 4004 BC. God says, I can imagine God is saying, you see that constellation sitting right on the horizon? That's Pisces, two fish with their tails tied together. That ribbon is like an umbilical cord. And sitting right there in Pisces is a planet called Jupiter. That's my son. That represents the Son of God. And he is being born in Pisces. And Pisces represents the future people out of whom my son is going to be born. That would be somewhere way down the road from you, a couple thousand years, long after your death, Adam. But out of your progeny will come Jacob and Esau. See those two fish with their tails tied together? That's twins attached to the same umbilical cord. Jacob and Esau. And out of Jacob is going to come my son, Jupiter, sitting right there on the horizon.
But JR, now the story gets interesting. There's a little bit of conflict that emerges a little bit later that same day. Another planet arose?
That would be at midnight.
At
So here we
midnight.
are, 7:14. He sees that on the eastern horizon. He watches as it rises to its zenith high in the sky exactly at midnight. God says, now, Adam, look at the eastern horizon. What do you see here? You see Leo the lion. And right between the front feet of Leo the lion, sitting right on top of a star named Regulus, is a planet called Saturn. Now, Adam, that planet represents Satan. And he is going to usurp the throne. You see, he's sitting right there on top of Regulus, which is in the handle of a sickle that goes up and like a sword, a two-edged sword, comes out of the mouth of the lion. God says, here is Jupiter, and if you'll watch over the next few months, Jupiter, who is now having a conjunction with with Regulus, the regal star, the scepter. You remember the dying Jacob in Genesis 49 said, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, the lion, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. So here is Saturn, whose symbol, by the way, became the sickle. You can see symbols of Saturn. Just go to the internet or go to an encyclopedia, look up the symbol of Saturn. It's a sickle. He grabbed that sickle out of the hand of Regulus on the first night of Adam's creation. What perfect timing. And so a few months later, he goes past, comes back and grabs it again, goes past, and it's a triple conjunction of Saturn right there with Regulus between the feet of Leo. This is an incredible night, this first night of Adam's life. What a message. God is teaching him the Bible in the stars.
The Bible in the stars. Now, we've studied this for many years, and it's sort of a conversational matter between JR and I. We understand it. There have been many books written. We mentioned J.A. Seiss, E.W. Bullinger. If you've never encountered the message of the gospel in the stars, you need to begin to educate yourselves. One of the best ways to do this would be right here in the May 2008 Prophecy in the News magazine. I know you're not going to get all the details that we have to offer, but you can in the magazine. Now, J.R., you've listed not only the first conjunction, which you have happening between Jupiter and Saturn, which you have happening between September 26th, 3998, the seventh year Adam was created, but you've also listed all the triple conjunctions, and you have them very carefully laid out in a table in this article.
Yes, I do. Right here on page 34, there is a chart of the triple conjunctions. There are 36 of them down through history. And the first one occurred when Adam was 105 years old. The last one occurred in 1980. Isn't that amazing?
It is.
In 1980. So, these triple conjunctions are fascinating. When Adam was 6 years old, that is, he began his seventh year on this earth, the first conjunction took place. He watched during those 6 years as Jupiter chased Saturn, coming out of Pisces through Aries and Taurus and Gemini, and finally getting through Leo, and coming around 6 years later, he had his first conjunction, or when Jupiter passed Saturn. It was a single conjunction, but it was like a hit. The first battle between Jupiter and Saturn, and it was in Virgo the Virgin. And this occurred on September 26th. That's mighty close to the new moon of September, isn't it?
It is.
And remember this woman clothed in the sun, moon under her feet, gives birth, and there is Satan ready to devour him. Well, this happened. This happened when Adam was 6 years old. The first conjunction in history, and it happened in Virgo, the Virgin who would bring forth the Son of God. So this is where you begin the story. This is where the story starts. This conjunction didn't happen in the second or the seventh or the 11th. It happened in the first conjunction.
Now, JR, again, I want to assure our viewers that we're really not talking about astrology here. Just wipe that out of your mind. We're talking about God's divine astronomy. And if you remember the story of creation, Adam and Eve had the righteous Abel, who unfortunately was done away with. But he was replaced by Seth, the godly line of Seth, leading down to the Messiah. Mm-hmm. And J.R. has quoted Josephus talking about Seth. And Seth and his sons were the inventors of that peculiar sort of wisdom which is concerned with the heavenly bodies and their order. In other words, the godly line of Seth had already systematically begun the study of the coming Messiah by watching the heavens. And J.R., this was handed down again and again and again, generation after generation. The story of the birth of Christ talks about the Magi who saw something in the east that caused them to come over into Israel and to come to the Messiah. So this is a study that is legitimized if you carefully observe it. Mm-hmm. It's legitimized in the lives of righteous men down through the ages.
Now, Seth and his sons, as you said, built two pillars to protect the prophecy of Adam, that the mm-hmm. world would be destroyed by water and then destroyed by fire. This is the ancient prophecy. Well, the first triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn occurred when Adam was 105 years old. It was on March the 7th, August 4th, and September 2nd, 3899 BC, and it mm-hmm. happened in Aquarius, the water bearer. Mm-hmm. So here we have the pouring out of the water upon the earth. This was the prophecy of the coming mm-hmm. flood. So this was a perfect time for Adam to receive the divine revelation that the world would someday be destroyed by an overwhelming flood. First triple conjunction occurred in Aquarius. Mm-hmm. Then there was the birth of Enoch in 3382 BC, the year of the 32nd Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. This time, again in Virgo. To me, amazing, because Virgo represents the birth of a Messiah figure. And it occurred the year Enoch was born. Mm. So Enoch walked with God, and he was not, because God took him. He was raptured alive into heaven. What a perfect Messiah figure, Gary.
Oh, perfect Messiah figure, but not only that, he's a perfect figure of all of the righteous redeemed who would someday be taken up in a moment, the twinkling of an eye, and glorified with Christ. Enoch is the first of type. And isn't it interesting that that happened in 3382, a triple conjunction?
You know, I mentioned that the first triple conjunction was in Aquarius. The second triple conjunction was also in Aquarius. So here's a profound revelation to Adam that the world would be destroyed by a coming flood. Well, when Enoch was 19 years old, he saw a triple conjunction of these two warring planets in the constellation Aries on July 7th, August 26th, and January 12th, 3362 BC. Why take place in Aries? Perhaps because Aries was the Lamb of God who would become victorious over Satan by giving himself in sacrificial death. Mm. Then, Gary, there were the stories of the fallen angels. Remember them?
Oh,
the
yeah.
Nephilim.
The Nephilim.
When Noah was 142 years old, there was a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Pisces. That's 2807 BC. And another 40 years later in Leo. Now, the conjunction in Pisces foretells the first advent of Christ. The one in Leo foretells the second advent of Christ. And Gary, as I looked at these conjunctions over the years, I found 5 of them, triple conjunctions, in Pisces. Mm. And of course, the 4th one was in 7 BC, the Christmas star. Triple conjunction in Pisces. And remember now, many of the ancient rabbis had written that a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Pisces would foretell the coming of the Messiah. In fact, because of errors in dating, and they didn't have computers back in those days, many of them thought that conjunction that presaged the birth of Moses mm-hmm. was a triple conjunction in Pisces. It was not. It was a single conjunction, but nevertheless, because of the miscalculations, they thought it was, and this, of course, led to this idea that a triple conjunction in Pisces would foretell the birth of the Messiah. We have we have 5 of them in Pisces. We have 4 conjunctions in 6,000 years, 4 triple conjunctions in Leo, and they foretell the second coming of Christ, 4 being the number of the world. Isn't that amazing?
It is.
What a perfect number. And we are awaiting the second coming of Jesus Christ in power and great glory. And it's all because of Jupiter and Saturn's conflict of the ages.
Yeah. Now, J.R., to those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, the teachings of the Israeli or the Israelite sages, and then later in the years of the rabbinate, these ideas, these bits of knowledge got handed down. Even the German astronomer Johannes Kepler, who lived in around 1630, or that was the end of his life, talked about the events, the great events of the world being connected with these conjunctions. It's amazing to me that
Yes.
Kepler, an astronomer, a German astronomer, picked up these stories.
And he named a number of births that happened around those conjunctions. Read some of them.
He named Noah's flood, the birth of Moses, the birth of Cyrus of Persia, the birth of Christ, birth of Charlemagne, birth of Martin Luther. And so he was thoroughly convinced that things happened according to a pattern.
Yeah. Do you remember the year Noah was warned of a flood? God said 120 years from now there's going to be a flood. Man's days are numbered, 120 years. That is the year of a triple conjunction. Noah was 480 years old. There was a triple conjunction in Virgo. And to me, Gary, it's like God saying there's going to be a birth of a new world through a watery birth, just as a human birth as depicted in Virgo and her virgin-born son. That was 120 years before the flood. 6 months before the flood, actually starting a year before the flood, ending up 6 months before the flood. Noah, 599 years old. There was another series of 3 conjunctions on December 11th, February 3rd, and June 28th. In Virgo, again, go figure, Gary, how can these 2 triple conjunctions, 120 years apart, be in the same constellation, Virgo, where God is saying, hurry up, Noah, the water's about to break.
Yes.
Isn't that amazing?
And by the way, you read earlier in Revelation 12, where there's a woman clothed with the sun and crowned with stars. She is none other than Virgo, the Virgin, and she is giving birth to the Messiah. So this idea is recorded in Scripture. J.R., we are running rapidly out of time, but there's one we cannot fail to mention, and that's the births of Jacob and Esau, perhaps one of the critical birthdays of all time. And we have here the birth of twins.
Yes. And they're 2 years old now, Jacob and Esau, twin sons of Isaac and Rebekah. The year is 1836, the year they were born. 2 years later, on May 29th, 1834 BC, there was a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Pisces. This, you remember, is the one that foretells the first advent of the Messiah. And Pisces then is given to Jacob as his house.
And the figure of Pisces in the heavens, now this is interesting, is 2 fish with their tails tied together. Isn't that suggestive of maybe of twins?
Yes, and that ribbon like umbilical cord. But this is a triple conjunction. Jacob and Esau are 2 years old. A triple conjunction. May 29th, August 7th, and again December 6th, 1834 BC. And this battle happened between the planets. You know, here's Jupiter. He catches up with Saturn and smacks him one, and then goes past, comes back and swats him for a second time, then comes back and hits him a third time as the retrograde motion occurs. This is absolutely incredible. Twin fish for twin boys, both tied together with umbilical cords from their mother's womb. And Gary, they even are fighting before they are born. This shows that the story goes back into the distant, eternity?
Eternity.
It is an eternity type problem that is being played out here on
That
earth.
battle came from another dimension, and it came right through the lives of Jacob and Esau into this dimension. And that battle is still being waged, and it is marked by the conflict between Jupiter and Saturn along the plane of the ecliptic.
Yeah. 4 years before the Exodus, there was a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Virgo. It was like God saying, Moses, I want you to go get my virgin bride and bring her out here to Sinai. There's going to be a wedding. This is absolutely incredible. There was a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Aries, the ram, in 1940, which to me said that the Jews are going to be slaughtered like Passover lambs. And again in 1980 in Virgo, where God is saying the bride is waiting for the Messiah. Israel is 33 years old in 1980, waiting for a 33-year-old groom.
Wow.
Well, I tell you, you've got to get this article. It's in our magazine, the May edition, Prophecy in the News. Please call the phone number at the bottom of your screen and get it today. This is J.R. Church and Gary Stearman. Until next time, keep looking up.